Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. On this episode of the podcast, Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer Jeffery kicks off a new series called Treasury Go Strategic. Topics will center around domestic and international bank fees, merchant card processing, vendor relationships, FBAR compliance, secure treasury, and more. It will showcase how to create value for your organization using data to make decisions, how to recognize tactical processes that you can further automate or manage by a third party, and how to move the organization forward. Welcome to the show, Craig, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Meredith. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Let's begin with our first episode of the series, What Does It Mean to Go Strategic?
It's not a definitional list of what is strategic or tactical. We assume that is understood. It's a prerequisite for this type of discussion. So I really would like to focus our thinking on three areas to keep it simple. First is establishing structure around planning and making sure you have a cadence that allows your organization to go strategic. That's the first one. The second is having an emphasis on eliminating operational and repetitive tasks. This is, the concept of eliminating unneeded steps or automating what is needed but can be automated, and outsourcing different tasks that are a headache or create excessive opportunity costs. This is that idea that most treasury organizations are thinly staffed. They're not staffed to do everything. And you have many high-value tasks that you aren't getting to spend as much time as you would like or your organization would like. And this has to change. That's the second one. And the third is a relentless discipline on working on achieving your strategic plans, making sure you're taking steps on those items that are strategic. So it's, first, making a good and effective plan and a cadence of staying attentive to it. Second is eliminating the operational activities. And third is really focusing on those strategic areas.
Can you provide an overview of why this series is important to treasurers in 2020?
Sure. I think it was important before, but we wanted to emphasize this in 2020 and beyond to really help encourage treasurers and other treasury executives and leaders to look farther out and figure out how to get where they want to be. Technology changes are providing truly unprecedented opportunities, more than before, and hopefully they'll continue to be unprecedented in the future, but there's a massive amount of opportunities in terms of scope and scale of what that can mean to Treasury. Many Treasury groups are not keeping up with their understanding, let alone exhibiting the discipline and the activities that get them there, the institutional discipline to truly go strategic or stay strategic. And that's important. And I don't say that in a negative way or to belittle everybody or the majority of people are listening. This has been true for us too as an advisory organization, a research firm, and an outsourced services company. We have to take the same medicine every quarter and every month because these changes impact what we do. We have to continually look at what we need to be doing and focusing on what we need to drop. And so this is important for every type of organization. I think the other piece is that the demands on Treasury have also increased. They've increased significantly since the financial crisis, which is a long time ago now, but they have remained elevated and they continue to increase. What we do with managing risk, how we can identify, opportunities for the organization, how do we reduce our exposures or support the business. This creates this increased demands on Treasury and expectations on Treasury, gives us more opportunities and more than ever before, the opportunity to expand the deep value that Treasury has been bringing and can bring to organizations in this time of ongoing change.
You mentioned three things that describe this series on what it means to go strategic. Can you expand on the planning part?
Well, I think we probably should have a whole episode on that just to talk about it. But I'll give a bit of an example. Many organizations set some type of cadence of they review and they set goals on a quarterly basis, usually for tasks, whether it's operational or tactical or even strategic, that they have a plan or a sprint to get a certain number of things done. And so whether you do it by quarter or 2 months or 4 months, and whether it's 4 quarters is all you look at, or maybe you look at 6 quarters or a year or some type of time frame. Let's just say it's broken out by quarters. So maybe for the first quarter, you look at a technology refresh. You do your planning. You look 3 years out. What are the tools we have? How are things being integrated? What does our process look like? Is it very broken and separate? Is it more integrated? Are we achieving straight through, or are we cheating to straight through? What are we doing with data? How does that change? There's so many activities that go with technology. Having this be one of the areas of focus, or one of the focus of a quarter is one example. Another quarter, perhaps quarter 2, is policy and framework refresh, making sure your tools, your policies, your frameworks are current. Things change with what you can invest, your payment policy, your risk, et cetera. Those policies need to be updated at some point. It needs to be fit into this. And that doesn't seem so strategic to update a policy, but part of the cadence can help you not get distracted and run around with the urgent. Maybe the third quarter is performance and benchmarking against your goals, measuring against outside organizations that are similar in complexity. And this requires data to manage that properly. And it can be measuring against your own goals, your own performance. Maybe the fourth quarter is risk and exposure review. Where are you exposed financially? What about fraud, operational risk? Where are we in managing our exposures? What is changing? How do we best address these changes? And is what we're doing appropriate for where we are and for where we're going? Quarter 5 might be another area, quarter 6, et cetera. So whether you have this review, maybe you do policies once every 2 years or once a year, but having some type of quarterly goals or sprint, most organizations find that really helps them continue to cycle back and say what's strategic, what's operational that we can get rid of, and having that discipline to continue to move forward.
Let me start with part of one of those areas, performance and benchmarking. How can organizations create value by using data? This includes more than just performance and benchmarking.
Yeah, it certainly does. Data is used for performance, benchmarking, additional analysis, running, protecting against fraud, forecasting, et cetera. So there's a lot that can be done with data. But let me briefly talk about a couple of these items. Well, maybe it won't be so brief, but one is we need to know what is relatively stable and what is changing rapidly in the outside world and in the world that impacts our organization. And data can help with that. What's changing with the mindset, what are your peers doing? And areas of stability don't require as much attention as those that are changing rapidly. And what's the reason for those rapid changes? Does that impact my organization? Should I do something about that? So there's a lot of data on what's occurring, everything from sentiment to investment to efficiency that makes sense. But if we look at operational or performance data or risk-related data, relationship, fee management, et cetera, or big data, I'll just say a few things about a couple of those. So operational or performance data, how are we doing? So these are some of the more mundane activities. Maybe the session should be called Go Tactical or Go Measurement. But, items processed, cost per items to process, error rates, resolution time, working capital measures, from the order to collect or order to pay cycle. What are we doing with liquidity management, our cost of capital and debt? So there's a number of operational performance data that should be more systematically managed so that people can compare, see how are we doing? Are we staying in good order? Are we improving over time from an operational standpoint so that it's naturally captured, hopefully systematically captured and reviewed and managed? On the risk-related side, what are the operational exposures and how are we protecting, for example, payment channels we have? The risk is growing greatly. Organizations are doing more to protect those. And there's a lot of data in terms of losses, the data in terms of what people are doing to protect their payment channels, both from a systematic and a human element side. How are our teams and staff trained on security, on risk, on being disciplined in this? So there's risk-related items there. There's relationship management, fee management. I won't talk about that. But also, we talk about big data, both structured and unstructured. The amount of data growth doubles every 2 years. It's a 40% growth a year. How do we manage that? What part of that data matters to us and how can we leverage it? So what are we doing to leverage it for analysis? Are we using it for better forecasting? It's a top area of time suck for treasury groups, and it's one of the top. It's either one or two the last several years of what organizations' initiatives are to improve. So it takes a lot of time, and it's a key area. And some of the tools can help us do that. Tools leveraging data for forecasting. So, I mean, this data, how can we leverage this data for security, for operational improvements? There's quite a bit that can be done, and we have other episodes that interview people and talk about that. This idea on the data, big data, other data, managing data, some are making really good headway. And how can that inform us? If others are leveraging that data and gaining efficiencies, gaining increased accuracy with their forecasting, identify anomalies which either reduce defects, identify potential fraud, how can that help us as we plan and invest in our people, our systems, and how can that change how we look at processes? Do we focus on individual handoff points, or do we look on an end-to-end basis? So those are some of the things about data. I know there's a lot more, and we have multiple sessions on data and formats, but there's a massive opportunity for Treasury to go strategic with data.
Perfect. And I had wanted to ask you, Craig, about key success factors in building strategic relationships, but we'll reserve that for another episode.
Okay.
Let's jump to some final thoughts you want to leave with our listeners. What kind of challenges and opportunities are you seeing this coming year?
Just a few thoughts. There's been a long run of growth, particularly in the U.S., North America, not quite as strong in some other areas, but there's been a long run of economic expansion. That's been quite good, and it's been a decade since the financial crisis, and there's a bit of lax mindset towards some of the risk, counterparty economic risk, in a number of organizations. Some are being diligent about it and continue to focus on it. But given the length of time we've had since our last crisis, I think how we manage that, monitor it, track it, and mitigate those risks is important. I think there's a number of organizations that aren't prepared. So this long run of growth of good times has made it so some people aren't as concerned about the risk, and that's the perennial challenge. We have a short mindset. The second part is more opportunity. There's been a long run of focus on improving processes and deploying technology. Many organizations have been spending heavily on banking technology, payment hubs, treasury management systems, supply chain finance systems, and improving processes and deploying this technology to great improvement to their organizations. So that's an ongoing opportunity. We think there's quite a bit of room to continue that, with everything from AI to robotic process automation and different tools that help us integrate systems to systems, like with APIs or open APIs, to make those connections better. And then really to summarize an answer to your question about what are we seeing coming this year and what we would want to leave with the listeners, I want to leave those three things I said in the beginning. One is create a structure around planning and establish a cadence, whether you do that on a quarterly basis, every 4 months or every 6 months, where there's clear attention to it. That really can allow you to go strategic, stay strategic, or continue to focus on those areas. Second is be diligent. Some of your staff and team, and the mindset should be, how can we eliminate operational repetitive tasks? So the emphasis on eliminating operational repetitive tasks is number 2. And 3 is having this relentless discipline and refocus on working to achieve those strategic goals. You're freeing up time from operational repetitive tasks. You need to pour that time into much more interesting, much more essential items and much more rewarding things for your organization. So create a structure around planning and cadence, emphasize eliminating operational tasks, and a relentless discipline on working on the strategic.
Excellent. Thanks, Craig. I'm looking forward to this series. It's very timely and relevant with the start of the new year, and I look forward to hearing more about it.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.